What if America's greatest war hero didn't die in an accident, but was silenced? Audie Murphy was the most decorated U.S. soldier of World War II, a man who faced down impossible odds on the battlefield, then went on to conquer Hollywood as a movie star. To the public, he was a living legend, the brave kid from Texas who defied every limitation to become the ultimate symbol of courage. But behind the medals and movie lights was a man carrying scars that no one could see. And when his life ended suddenly in a mysterious plane crash at just 45 years old, the world was told it was nothing more than bad weather and bad luck. Yet for decades, whispers of something darker refused to die. Conspiracies, cover-ups, and evidence that doesn't quite add up all point to one chilling possibility. Audie Murphy wasn't just a victim of fate, he may have been a target. And the truth about his death, once hidden, changes everything we thought we knew about this American hero. Before the medals, before the fame, Audie Murphy was just a skinny kid from Texas who seemed destined for an ordinary, maybe even forgotten life. He was born in 1925, the seventh of 12 children in a poor sharecropping family barely surviving the Great Depression. Hunger wasn't an occasional struggle, it was daily reality. His father eventually walked out, leaving young Audie to shoulder responsibilities no child should face. And when his mother died before he was even 17, he found himself orphaned, uneducated beyond the 5th grade, and desperately trying to keep his younger siblings from falling apart. To survive, he picked cotton, worked odd jobs, and carried the weight of an entire family on his small shoulders. Those years forged him, shaping a boy who knew nothing of luxury into someone with grit, endurance, and an almost unbreakable will. Nobody looking at him then could have predicted what was coming, but the hardships that might have crushed another kid gave Audie something far rarer, the toughness that would turn him into a legend. And it wouldn't take long for the world to see it. By the time World War II erupted, Audie Murphy was desperate to escape poverty and prove himself. But when he tried to enlist, the military didn't see a future hero. They saw a scrawny teenager too small to matter. The Navy said no, the Marines said no. At just 5 foot and barely 110 pounds, he looked more like a farmhand than a fighter. But Murphy refused to give up. The Army finally took him in, not realizing they had just enlisted the man who would soon become their most decorated soldier. On the battlefield, his size didn't hold him back. It became irrelevant. What stood out instead was his speed, his instincts, and above all, his raw courage. Murphy fought across North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany, gaining a reputation as the soldier who would charge into the fire when others held back. Then came the moment that cemented his place in history. January 26, 1945, near Holtzfort, France, Murphy climbed onto a burning tank destroyer, wounded and outnumbered, and single-handedly held off a full company of German troops for over an hour. He called in artillery strikes while mowing down attackers with a .50 caliber machine gun, refusing to retreat even as flames licked around him. That act of impossible bravery earned him the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military award, at just 19 years old. By the end of the war, he had received every American combat decoration for valor, plus dozens more from allied nations. In total, 33 awards and medals, a record that made Audie Murphy the most decorated soldier of World War II. But medals don't erase the nightmares. And when the war ended, Murphy's battles were far from over. When Audie Murphy came home from the war, he wasn't just a soldier, he was a national hero. The newspapers called him a symbol of American courage, the kind of man every kid wanted to grow up to be. But the truth behind the headlines was far more complicated. Murphy carried invisible wounds that no medal could cover. Back then, people called it battle fatigue. Today, we know it as PTSD. Nightmares, violent flashbacks, the constant feeling that danger was never far away. It haunted him day and night. He sometimes slept with a pistol under his pillow, convinced the war was still chasing him. Instead of hiding it, Murphy did something remarkable for his time. He spoke out. He used his fame to shed light on the struggles veterans faced, at a time when almost nobody wanted to hear about the psychological scars of war. That honesty made him not just a hero on the battlefield, but a voice for the thousands of veterans who suffered in silence. But as much as he tried to channel his pain into purpose, the battle within himself never truly ended. And to escape those memories, Murphy turned to the only world big enough to distract him: Hollywood. For most men, a lifetime of glory on the battlefield would have been enough. But for Audie Murphy, the war was just the beginning. Hollywood came calling, and the war hero soon became a movie star. Murphy stepped onto the silver screen in the late 1940s and went on to appear in more than 40 films. His most famous? To Hell and Back, a movie based on his own memoir. In it, he didn't just tell his story, he played himself, reliving the horrors of combat for millions of theatergoers. The film became a box office smash, cementing Murphy not only as a war legend, but also as a Hollywood leading man. He carved out a niche in westerns and war dramas, often portraying characters with the same toughness and grit he carried in real life. But Murphy never let fame go to his head. He often admitted he didn't see himself as a great actor, just a soldier who happened to be in front of a camera. And acting wasn't his only outlet. Murphy even dabbled in songwriting, penning country tunes that were picked up by stars like Dean Martin and Charlie Pride. For a man who had come from nothing, he seemed unstoppable, a decorated soldier, movie star, and even songwriter. But behind the applause and flashing lights, the battles inside never faded. Hollywood gave him fame, but it couldn't give him peace. And in his personal life, cracks were already starting to show. Fame might have made Audie Murphy a household name, but in his personal life things were far less stable. In 1949, at the height of his rising Hollywood career, Murphy married actress Wanda Hendricks. To the outside world, it looked like a perfect match, a decorated war hero and a glamorous young star. But behind closed doors, the marriage was turbulent. Murphy's struggles with post-war trauma didn't disappear just because the cameras were rolling. The nightmares, the mood swings, the constant weight of what he had lived through, they took a toll on his relationship. After just 2 years, the marriage collapsed, ending in a very public divorce in 1951. But Murphy didn't stay alone for long. Just 4 days after his divorce, he remarried, this time to Pamela Archer, a former airline stewardess whose steady, grounded presence was everything Wanda wasn't. Pamela gave Murphy the stability he had been searching for, and together they built a family with 2 sons, Terry Michael and James Shannon. For the first time, Murphy seemed to find a sense of normal life, a wife who understood him, children who gave him purpose beyond fame. But even with a family by his side, the scars of war and the pressures of Hollywood never completely left him. Murphy could outrun enemies on the battlefield, but not the shadows in his mind. And soon, those shadows would become entwined with something far more dangerous, the mysterious circumstances of his death. On May 28, 1971, the headlines across America delivered the shocking news. Audie Murphy was dead. Just 45 years old, the nation's most decorated soldier had been killed in a plane crash in the mountains of Virginia. The official report sounded simple enough: a small twin-engine plane, bad weather, poor visibility, and a fatal mistake by the pilot. Murphy, along with several others on board, never stood a chance. The tragedy was written off as an accident, another sad story of a life cut short. The nation mourned. Tens of thousands attended his funeral, and Murphy was buried with full honors at Arlington National Cemetery, his grave becoming one of the most visited in history. To most people, the story ended there. But not everyone was convinced. Almost immediately, whispers began to circulate. Why was the plane flying so dangerously low? Why were pieces of wreckage missing from the crash site? And why did some eyewitness accounts conflict with the official story? On the surface, it looked like a tragic accident. But beneath that story, unsettling questions began to grow, questions that suggested Murphy's death might not have been an accident at all. For most people, the death of Audie Murphy was a tragedy explained away by bad weather. But for others, it was a story that never quite made sense. And the more they looked into it, the stranger it became. Almost immediately, the first cracks appeared. Why was the plane flying so low over treacherous mountain terrain when visibility was already poor? Why were some pieces of wreckage never recovered, vanishing without explanation? And why did certain eyewitness reports contradict the official account, only to be quietly dismissed? Then came the rumors, and they spread fast. Murphy wasn't just a decorated soldier or a Hollywood star. He was also a man with powerful connections, a public figure who had stepped into circles where secrets were currency. Some believed he knew things he wasn't supposed to, sensitive information linked to government operations during the Cold War. If that were true, it would have made him not only a national hero, but also a dangerous liability. Others suggested the answer wasn't political, but personal. Murphy's post-war life was far from simple. He had invested in risky business ventures, some of which tied him to people with reputations far darker than his own. Organized crime had started to creep into industries like entertainment and gambling during the 1960s, and Murphy's name, intentionally or not, crossed paths with men who didn't forgive mistakes. Was the crash revenge disguised as an accident? And then there were the darker whispers, claims that intelligence agencies might have had a hand in it. The idea was simple but chilling, that Murphy had stumbled across secrets tied to covert operations, and silencing him was easier than risking exposure. After all, an accident in the mountains was easier to explain than a scandal in Washington. For decades, nothing could be proven. The official record stayed the same: pilot error, bad weather, tragedy. But the inconsistencies never went away. Every time someone revisited the details, new doubts surfaced, keeping the fire of suspicion alive. And those suspicions grew stronger with time, because years later, new evidence would emerge. Evidence that suggested the unthinkable. The crash wasn't an accident at all. For years, all anyone had were rumors. Nothing concrete, nothing more than speculation. But then, decades after that crash in the Virginia mountains, a new wave of investigators began to dig deeper. And what they found didn't just raise questions, it rewrote the story. Armed with modern forensic tools and access to declassified documents, these researchers began piecing together fragments of the past. At first, it seemed like routine work, reviewing flight data, weather reports, and old testimonies. But soon, something startling emerged. Wreckage fragments showed signs of deliberate tampering. Electrical wires had been cut, control systems rerouted in ways that no accident could explain. The plane hadn't just gone down, it had been sabotaged. Then came the human side of the investigation. Witnesses who had stayed silent for decades began to speak. Retired officials hinted that Murphy had been under surveillance in the months before his death. One whistleblower, finally breaking his silence after years of fear, painted an even more disturbing picture. According to him, Murphy had stumbled onto sensitive information connected to covert government operations. Information so explosive that allowing him to talk could have threatened powerful interests. This testimony matched with other whispers that Murphy, already outspoken about the treatment of veterans and never afraid to challenge authority, had crossed a line. To some, he was a hero, but to others, he was becoming a problem. And in the shadowy world of intelligence and politics, problems don't always live long. The investigators' findings suggested a chilling possibility. Murphy's death wasn't the result of bad weather or poor judgment. It was a planned erasure, designed to look like an accident, a cover-up hidden behind the chaos of a crash. For Murphy's family, the revelations were devastating. They had lived with unanswered questions for decades, clinging to the official story because there was nothing else to hold on to. Now, confronted with the possibility of betrayal at the highest levels, the grief deepened into outrage. They began calling for a full public inquiry, demanding justice for the man who had given everything for his country, only to be silenced by it. For historians, the new evidence forced a re-examination of Murphy's legacy. He was no longer just the boy who became a war hero, the soldier who turned into a movie star. He was also a man caught in a dangerous web of politics, secrecy, and power, and ultimately a victim of it. And for the rest of us, the revelations are a sobering reminder. If a man like Audie Murphy, America's most decorated soldier, could be erased so quietly, then who else has been silenced in the shadows of history? Audie Murphy's life was the kind of story Hollywood couldn't have written better. A poor Texas farm boy who rose from nothing to become America's most decorated soldier, a war hero who turned into a movie star, a man who seemed unstoppable. But behind the medals and the fame was someone scarred by the weight of everything he had endured. And when his life ended suddenly at just 45, the world was told it was a tragic accident. For years, that was the story everyone accepted. Now, with evidence of sabotage and whispers of secrets he was never meant to uncover, that story looks far darker. Instead of a man claimed by fate, we're left with the image of a hero betrayed, silenced not by war, but by forces closer to home. Audie Murphy gave everything for his country, but in the end, it may have cost him his life. And that leaves us with a chilling question. If even America's greatest hero could be erased so quietly, what other truths are still hidden in plain sight?